Good evening. Once again, here we are in the great world of Facebook. Oh, I just looked at myself in the iPad. Can you see the little lamb over my shoulder? Isn't he beautiful? Her name is Precious. We just love her. I am very happy to be here with you this evening. If you can hear me and you do see me, would somebody let me know? Because Betty's not here tonight, and I'm not sure. Okay? Thank you. I love to tell stories about going to amusement parks. And part of that is because it was one of the few places that we went as a family. My father worked all the time, and he, when he did take off, he never knew quite what to do with his kids. So I guess he figured if he brought us to a amusement park, we'd be just fine and kept busy. So yesterday when they announced the opening of Coney Island, I thought about my times at Coney Island. Michelle just said you can hear me. Thank you. Thank you, Karen. And we went to Coney Island one year. Must have been in the summer, though, not this time. And we went on something called the Wonder Wheel. Now, does anybody remember the Wonder Wheel? It's still operational in Coney Island. It was what they call a double Ferris wheel. It was very, very high, very high. And you sat in a cage, and there were all these cages around the wheel. And on the outer ring, the cages swung back and forth. Well, I went on that with my brother. I had to be about 6, maybe 7. And my brother was 5 years older than me, so he was really a rip. And he started swinging that cage, going back and forth. I was terrified. We were we were so high, hanging over the people and then hanging over the ocean. I just started screaming and crying. And I wasn't a scaredy kid. But let me tell you, this brother of mine, he could terrify you. And so what happened was we were up there and something happened. It got stuck for a minute. And there we were, all the way at the top, just as it curved. We were hanging out and we had to wait. And each time it went down and they let somebody out of the sets of cages, we had to wait. And I just looked out the side for some comfort. And what I saw my father looking up at me. And when we finally got to the bottom, I was crying, and it just, all this turmoil was going on inside me, you know? And my dad was looking up at me, though. And at the end of the ride, when they opened the cage, I ran out, and my father grabbed me, and he said, "I've got you." You hear that? I've got you. And I think of that every time there's turmoil for me. I got you. And today it seems that there's a real explosion of turmoil, doesn't it? So much everywhere. And I think as we prepare for Easter, it seems right that the readings from yesterday talk about some turmoil. Jesus is entering Jerusalem, Palm Sunday, and we hear the reading of entering Jerusalem with the palms, and then we hear the Passion. But, to tell you the truth, Palm Sunday is not about the palms. I'm always amazed. Church parking lots are overflowing on Ash Wednesday and Palm Sunday. It's like, I guess they figure they're getting something for nothing. I don't know. And I used to belong to a parish that was predominantly Hispanic and Italian. Let me tell you, Palm Sunday was the biggest day of the year. The little old ladies used to sit outside and weave together and braid the palm. And then one of the priests got into it, and he sat with them through all the masses. But it's not about that. It has never been about that. When Jesus was entering Jerusalem, the whole city was in turmoil. It was they were getting ready to celebrate a huge feast of Passover. And as Jesus was coming in this side of the city, on this side of the city was Pontius Pilate. And he was the governor of Judea. He was the governor of the land. And he was entering from the west side of the city. And it was a standard practice for the governor and the troops to come to Jerusalem at big feasts and holidays to keep order, so there was no trouble. But just think of the contrast for a minute between these two entrants into Jerusalem. Jesus rode a donkey. Pilate rode a war horse. Pilate led a column of soldiers. One had cloaks thrown down before him. The other lifted up weapons and armor. One was disarmed and nonviolent. The other came armed and ready for violence. One willed life, the other power. Just think of that right now, in your life right now. One came for peace and nonviolence. The other came for power. Does that sound familiar, what's going on in our world today? Which would you choose? Would you choose the nonviolent, peaceful entry or the powerful one? Jesus had made his choice. As he came through the town, people pulled off their cloaks and put them down on the ground before him, which meant the donkey had to walk on the cloaks. And these cloaks, they were the protective covering of people. You know, putting them down left the people exposed. A lot of symbolism in all of this. And what does Jesus do? Well, we are told when he sees the city and the cloakless people, Jesus weeps. He weeps. And he says, if only this day you knew what makes for peace. Isn't that the question that Jesus is still asking us? If only you knew this day what makes for peace. I kind of never realized something before. These past couple of weeks, as I was reading the Gospels and then reading the Gospels of Holy Week this week, I came to see something. There was a phrase repeated, and the phrase was, at the appointed time. There was a time for all of this that we are about to commemorate. There was a time for all of it to happen. And it certainly is the appointed time, isn't it? To see Holy Week through the eyes of our time, where we are asked to welcome Jesus by taking off our cloaks, whatever we are protecting ourselves with, whatever we are covering away from Jesus, and place that down to welcome him. Now, that is the work of a lifetime, not just a week. But it is something to concentrate on this week. Because Jesus sees the truth. He knows the truth. He is the truth. And he brings that into our world and our time. And he sees our world, our country, and us as we are. Not as we try to cover it sometime. You know what I particularly liked yesterday? I didn't see it myself, but then I went back and saw the coverage on the television. They had the Palm Sunday Mass from the Vatican, and the Pope was presiding, and they brought the Pope his papers for his homily, to read his homily, and his glasses, and he sent them away. I don't know why. Nobody knew why. They probably know now. But it almost seemed like he was like conserving his energy. His words had already been sent out and printed. Right? Printed and sent out in that order. Right? And he was humble enough to say, not today. Got to save his energy. And I wondered how many times, like Jesus, the Pope weeps over the world. Because both the Pope and Jesus see the pain, the loss, the cruelty, the sadness that we carry. And this week, Jesus enters into that. That's what it's about. Jesus enters into what we carry. He knows, and he comes to suffer, to lift us. He suffers in order to lift us from all the turmoil, to bring us to new life. I often think each year, am I making a little step toward receiving that? I'm not so sure this year. You know, I've been kind of limping along this year, but I'm doing my best, and hopefully you are. Well, maybe I'm not always doing my best. You know how it is, right? But we're going to try. Let's try together. Let's think of each other this week. Because, you know, the English translation in the Bible of the word for turmoil means to shake and to quake, like an earthquake. Isn't it like that sometimes? And in the gospel, interesting, the same word is used for Jesus' entry into Jerusalem. 2 readings from yesterday speak of that quaking. Everything was changing. Everything was about ready to burst forth. The 2 readings from the Mass yesterday, they celebrate first Jesus' entry into Jerusalem and then the passion and death of Jesus. So, which is it? Is it palms and cloaks and hosannas, or is it suffering and death? And I think the answer is yes. It is both. This week, it is both. Every day, it is both. Both our tears and our joys. Every day, Jesus lives. He lived in this tension. As he went about listening to people, healing their pain, right? And at the same time, they were plotting to kill him. You know when you know that they're stabbing you in the back? Well, this went on for him. And yet, through it, he continued to choose life. He did this to show us the way and called us to walk in the same tension that's in our lives. Do you remember I talked about the wonder wheel? Well, I was hanging over the crowd. Well, my dad said, I got you. And then he took me, and with the rest of my family and extended family, we walked around the playland. And finally, we wound up back at the wonder wheel. And my father said to me, want to try it with me? And now people, can you understand why I take crazy chances? Because I had a father who said, I'm with you. And I knew I was not alone on that wonder wheel. Where my brother, I think, would open the gate of the cage and thrown me out, you know. But you want to try it with me? What in your life is Jesus saying? Do you want to try it with me? You're not alone. That is Holy Week. Try it with me. And on the 3rd day, Easter, Jesus rose and conquered all kinds of death. But our world, our country, our lives sometimes still have a shadow of darkness. Now, I have to be honest with you, many times since the Wonder Wheel and Rye Beach and all those places we went to, I still find myself feeling alone and afraid and lost. Don't you? Don't you find yourself feeling that way? But I try to remember. And I close my eyes and I hear, you are not alone. I got you. I got you. We live in hope of resurrection. We are not alone. Not just what happens after physical death, but what's happening all the time. Anytime there is hope, comfort, and love. And I was reminded of this. I saw something on the news a little while ago about a 7-year-old boy who asked not to get any birthday presents. Can you imagine that? He wanted no birthday presents. Instead, he wanted people to donate to the American Cancer Society because his little sister had cancer and he wanted her cured. And last year he did that. And this year he said, please, no presents. Donate for cancer. And they started a GoFundMe page, and he raised over $20,000. He's 7 years old. Wow, that's amazing. You see, everywhere there's signs of comfort, of peace, of you are not alone, I got you. The fireman carrying a small child out of a building. Or a neighbor, one of my neighbors I saw feeding a homeless person up on William Floyd Parkway. Or just a few months ago, a soldier outside Kyiv embracing an old woman. This old woman and her elderly neighbor buried the old woman's son who had been killed by the Russians. They buried him in the backyard. And as the soldiers came through, the Ukrainian soldier just embraced her. You are not alone. I got you. Like Jesus, I think all of us, don't we battle sometimes and suffer lots of darkness? But we hold on because we know we are not alone. Jesus said, I am with you always. If you know me, you have heard that expression thousands of times. Because what else is, that's the whole thing. I am with you always. This Holy Week, we are faced with choices. Which procession will we join in our lives? The one of negativity, power, despair, or the one of peace and hope, and helped to enlarge it. This is our Holy Week, our holy journey. And Jesus asked one thing of us. Just think what we're going to hear on Thursday. Stay awake. Stay awake to suffering. Awake to the resurrection. Not just the physical death, but the death everywhere we are. Help to bring the resurrection. You know, a minister who ran an outreach, he told a story about this old man who came to the outreach, and it was very cold outside, very, very cold. And the old man was using a wheelchair, and he got somehow in to get a sandwich. His feet were so cold, they were covered in ice. He had nothing. And as he was waiting on the line, a young woman who also lived on the streets came by. And they had baskets with underwear and socks and different pieces of clothing around. And this woman grabbed a pair of socks and went over, didn't know the old man, knelt down in front of him and put his feet, each foot between her hands, and held the feet and warmed them up, and then put a sock on them. And after they got the sandwiches, the young woman pushed the old gentleman down to the shelter where they could both get some warmth and a warm night. We bring about resurrection. We share in Jesus' power when we know that we are not alone and we can do it because I got you. Where do you see resurrection today? Sometimes it's hard, isn't it? You know, Michelle and I just watched the news. Well, sometimes at the end of the news, I'm going to put my head down and just weep. A couple of times we shut off the sound and put our heads down. We couldn't take it. Can we bring something different? Can you bring something different? Each of us in our own way. How can we help bring hope and light and peace? Jesus' resurrected presence today. Knowing, living, believing that we are not alone. I got you. I'm going to challenge you to take a risk this Easter season and do resurrection. Live it. Maybe in small ways. Help someone. Be present to someone. Because then indeed it will be a happy Easter. And it all changes. It's up to us. And I know, listen, I live in the same world you do. I know how hard this is. And one of the things I'm doing this year, I was just caught by something. You know how after Easter, it's like it's all over? I often think of that. The day after Easter, all the chocolate bunnies go on sale. And then boom, they're gone. They pull them back in. What about if we paid attention to what is the Easter season, the great 50 days between Easter and Pentecost? I call it the forgotten season because people just think it's over. Well, this year I'm going to stress that. And I'm going to begin by sending to everybody on the mailing list a short, I can't really call it a novena because a novena is 9, but short prayers. It's going to be called the Stations of Joy, and it's 6 stops along Jesus' resurrection journey, each of his appearances. And for the 6 days after Easter, I will be sending one message out each day. And I hope that helps set you and your mindset to living in this resurrected presence. And then I'll be offering a couple of other things. But I did want to say a personal word. Very recently, a very dear friend of mine, Father Frank Gator, died. And Frank was an outstanding man. Actually, he's one of the people who influenced me the most in my life. And due to all kinds of circumstances, it wasn't the best parting leaving the earth. And we are going to have on April 7th a prayer and celebration of the life of Father Frank Gator. If you knew Father Frank and you're interested in participating with us, it will be in Deer Park. Just send me an email and I'll send you the information, because I never met anybody in my life who was so present and so resurrected, you know, just that resurrection energy. And it's appropriate that we remember him in the Easter season. And I remember you. I do. I remember you, Barbara. I see you. And I know. And I want you to know you're not alone. We are in this together. Right, Susan Gainey? Mm-hmm. Have a beautiful evening. A rich and hopeful Easter. And I'll show you the sign behind me, but it will appear backwards. But it says here, he is risen. You see, Jesus is risen. We're not pretending that he's going to die again. What we're going to do is we're going to remember. But we are always people of the resurrection, because each of us knows that we are never alone. And the message is, I got you, Arlene. I got you. Have a good night. I love you all.